Although Flotilla-41 was chartered in 1974, its roots go back to 1790 when Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, proposed a fleet of ships known as cutters to collect revenues, enforce tariff and trade laws, and to prevent smuggling. These cutters were designed to be relatively small with a single mast and 2 or more head sails, and built for speed to fulfill their assigned missions. As a result, on August 4, 1790, the First Congress authorized the construction of 10 cutters. The consolidation of 5 formally distinct federal services, namely the Revenue Cutter Service, the U.S. Lighthouse Service, the Steamboat Inspection Service, the Bureau of Navigation, and the U.S. Life Saving Service, formed the core of what is now the United States Coast Guard, enacted by President Woodrow Wilson and signed into law and passed by Congress on January 20, 1915. For over 2 centuries, the U.S. Coast Guard has safeguarded our nation's maritime interests in the heartland, in the ports, at sea, and around the globe. They protect the maritime economy and the environment. They defend our maritime borders and save those in peril.
What's this on the radio? Ship breaking up.
She's a T2 tanker and split right now.
Get yourself a crew. You assist that ship. Here.
That's why I signed up.
Not giving up on him. Not on my watch.
If the roots of Flotilla-41 is the U.S. Coast Guard, then the foundation of Flotilla-41 lies with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. In the summer of 1934, a yachtsman named Malcolm Boylan planted the seed that eventually became the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Boylan had just been elected Commodore of the newly created Pacific Riders Yacht Club, which was about to undertake a cruise from its home in Los Angeles to Catalina Island. Boylan asked a Coast Guard acquaintance, Lieutenant Commander C.W. Thomas of the cutter Hermes, to inspect the club's boats before their departure. Another of the Hermes officers, Lieutenant F.C. Pollard, made the trip to Catalina on board Boylan's yacht, and the 2 men had a long discussion about the relationship between the Coast Guard and the boating community. When the Coast Guard Reserve was authorized by Act of Congress on June 23, 1939, the Coast Guard was given a legislative mandate to use civilians to promote safety on and over the high seas and the nation's navigable waters. 2 years later, Congress amended the 1939 Act with passage of the Auxiliary and Reserve Act of 1941. Passage of this act designated the Reserve as a military branch of the active service, while the civilian section, formerly referred to as the Coast Guard Reserve, became the Coast Guard Auxiliary. When the U.S. entered World War II, 50,000 auxiliary members joined the war effort as military teams. Many of their private vessels were placed into service in an effort to protect the U.S. coasts. Some went on patrol off the East Coast in search of German U-boats that were sinking supply ships bound to Europe. The 4 cornerstones of the Coast Guard Auxiliary are operational support of U.S. Coast Guard, public education, recreational boating and marine safety, and fellowship. Flotilla-41 is located in Port Ludlow, Washington, under the direction of District 13, Division 4. As with most organizations, they start with the vision of a single person. And Flotilla-41's story began just that way and is best told with the 4 cornerstones of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. The driving force behind the creation of this flotilla was Roland Culkins. He came to Port Ludlow in 1973 and helped organize the Port Ludlow Yacht Club. Having considerable experience as a member of Coast Guard Auxiliary in Portland, Oregon since October 1957, Roland assumed the title of Chairman of Chartering. This involved the training of prospective flotilla members and officers. With that completed, the Flotilla-41 charter dinner and meeting was held, at the Port Ludlow Beach Club on December 14, 1974. Attending this banquet were 19 officers from the district and division of the Coast Guard and Coast Guard Auxiliary, plus 18 charter members and their spouses. As a result, the total attendance at this event was about 70 people. Of course, Mr. Calkins was the first flotilla commander.
Fair to Kingston, Seattle traffic. Walla traffic, roger, thanks. Light tug Kirsten H at Restoration inbound, Port Orchard. The ATB Dublin C, northbound approaching Alki. She's headed for Anacortes, but she will be pulling in towards Elliott Bay for a crew transfer. In the bay now, the tug Billy H underway from Pier 1 with 2 barges. She'll be northbound out of the bay after she stretches down. And coming out of the West Waterway, the container ship BBC Colorado. Danielle, Seattle traffic. Billy H traffic, thank you. Baltic Sea traffic, roger, thank you.
The following have served as Flotilla Commander and Vice Flotilla Commander of Flotilla-41 throughout its history.
We'll be stopping in towards Elliott Bay for a crew transfer. The tug Billy H is underway now from Pier 1, Seattle. Should be taking 2 barges northbound out of the bay. And on initial, from Pier 5, West Waterway to BBC Colorado. Yeah, Billy H traffic, roger, and just to confirm, what type of barges were those? Billy H traffic, roger that, thanks. The BBC Colorado bulker will be getting underway from Pier 5 shortly.
All right. There were gill netters in the bay earlier. Nobody has sighted any lately. If you do see any,
Thanks, Harvester.
Billy H. Seattle traffic. The fishing vessel Harvester is southbound at Sierra Gulf for Pier 90 Seattle.
The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary has over 30,000 men and women with units in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and Guam, and they are all dedicated to serve and to save. Over the last 5 years, auxiliarists have performed 583,500 vessel safety checks, taught 320,000 hours of boating safety courses, conducted 809,000 hours of public outreach, gave 2 million hours of administrative support, rescued $157 million in property, and saved 785 lives while assisting 11,000 others. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary is always ready.